Bienvenue, welcome, Ani, Bojo, ben arrivato. My name is Nathalie Desrosiers and I'm the principal of Massey College. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here. I first want to acknowledge that Massey College is built on indigenous lands, the lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and it is the treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship toward this land and the great privilege that we have to be here to talk about the media and talk about the evolution of the media, understanding media change. I'm very grateful to Senior Fellow Paolo Granata, who has brought forward the idea of doing a Massey Dialogue on this issue. He's a professor at the Book and Media Studies at U of T, at St. Michael's College. He's been a Senior Fellow for several years now. He really is a creator, an educator, innovator, cross-disciplinary person. He's done lots of things. The first time I met him, he brought me a deck of cards with Gutenberg on it. So I've always been impressed with his creativity. And so I want to thank him for initiating this good conversation, and to all of you, both here and online, for participating in it. Welcome to Massey.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. It was such an honor to be here, and so thank you again for everyone here. And thank you online for those who are following this conversation online. So I think there will be room later today to join the conversation. So please step in, even if you are following this event online. There is room for you, so we really look forward to your contributions. So if you're watching this event online, but also thank you for all attendees in person and our panelists and the book author Carlos Scolari. So I think it's time to get started and dive firstly into the actual book on the evolution of media, understanding media change. So this is a fascinating journey that Carlos Scolari put together. Fascinating journey presenting a unique perspective in understanding the life cycle of media, life cycle of the evolutionary process of media. Building on the evolutionary perspective, the evolutionary approach, Carlos Scolari was able to really put together a few intriguing questions in the analogy of the evolution. So the idea of emergence, competition, dominance, hybridization, adaptation, and even the possible extinction of different media species. So this is absolutely an analogy, right? The evolutionary biology, an analogy that is so well expressed in the book. And so Carlos' book illuminates this kind of complex, interconnected network of media evolution, moving particularly beyond some traditional, let's say, linear chronological view to understand the integrated relationships between new media and old forms, and particularly how they adapt and change and evolve, right, within the shifting socio-economic context. And so we're very pleased to have Carlos Scolari joining us for this book launch and other panels. So let me say a few words about Carlo. Carlos Scolari is a full professor at the Department of Communication, Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, where he coordinates the PhD program in communication between 2018 and 2023. His last books are Media Evolution with Fernando Rapa, Cultura Snack, La Guerras de las Plataformas, the war of platforms, and on the evolution of media, just hot off press. And also Carlos was the principal investigator in the Horizon 2020 Transliteracy project, and now coordinates a new project, the Platcom project. So he's very active as a researcher, as a scholar, as an educator, so we're very grateful to know more about him. And on our next panelist, Siobhan O'Flynn, she's an assistant professor, teaching stream director of Canadian Studies at the University College St. George campus in the University of Toronto. And she has consulted on digital interactive, participatory, transmedia, augmented reality, and virtual reality storytelling via her company, Narrative Now, for almost 20 years. And she's the co-creator of an online site, tmcresourcekit.com, a resource for Canadian producers moving into the digital sphere. Her most recent project, Kensington Market, Hidden Histories, an interactive map of an augmented reality app that revealed the layered history of key locations in the market, received a Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for Youth Achievement from the Ontario Heritage Trust in 2017. And so her current research and publishing focuses on children, data privacy, and the need for strengthened legislation, big data, Disney, Netflix, and the streaming wars. And so the streaming wars are coming back. Finally, right next to me, Mon Rodriguez Amat is principal lecturer and research and innovation lead in the Department of Media, Arts and Communications at Sheffield Hallam University in Sheffield, South Yorkshire in England. His main area of research revolves around communicative spaces, the technological and structural conditions for communicative interactions, the cultural constructions of time and space, citizenship, and power. And so all these discussions emerge in the intersection of media governance, research, cultural and geographic production, the democratic debates, communities and identities growing from the geopolitics of social media platforms and communication technologies. So we have enough material and contents for such a productive and engaging discussion. I'll kick off a series of questions and be reminded at the end of our dialogue and conversation, so you all will be invited to share your questions, both online and in person. All right, I'll kick off with to break the ice, with a question with our author, so Carlos Scolari. I wanted to give you a chance to, again, kick off the conversation. So one of the main points of this book is that essentially this co-evolutionary approach to study media represents a brand new approach. So how does the book differ from or enhance traditional narratives of linear progress in media evolution, in media history, media theory? So what's the unique perspective that your book really brings up? So there are different disciplines in the field that attempted to map the evolution of media from different perspectives, such as media history, media archaeology, media ecology. We have many metaphors that essentially map the field. So you came up with a metaphor of the evolution, the analogy of the evolution. And so what is different in this book if we want to really understand how to understand media?
Why should you buy it?
Exactly.
Thanks, Paolo, for the presentation. Thanks, Massey College, for organizing this event in such a beautiful place. I think the main problem that we have today, not only media or to understand media change, is complexity. How do we deal with complexity? That's a problem in political science, it's a problem in social sciences. populism is a simple answer to political complexity. We need to learn how to think in complexity. So, what disciplines have analyzed media change? In first place, media history. In general, media history has produced single media histories. We have beautiful books about the history of radio, history of television, and in that sense, I'm very McLuhanian, in the sense that we cannot understand a single media isolated from the rest of the other media. That's a limitation. Fortunately, we have a new generation of young people working in media history and working with a more complex approach. We have general books about history of media in general. And in general, these books, history of communication, from the clay table to TikTok, they propose a linear sequential of media. And that's cool, but I think that's to kill the complexity. Media archaeology is really fantastic. Also media history. I read a lot of media history, obviously. That's the matter for my own reflection. And media archaeology, what does it do? It focuses on single media, single devices from the past. They are inspired a lot by Michel Foucault, no? The archaeology of, I don't know, the telegraph, for example. But they refuse the big approach, the macro approach. It's like a microscope, very useful, but they're not interested in creating something bigger from a theoretical perspective. So I think that's a space for developing a theory of media evolution. When I talk about evolution, I'm not talking about the linear traditional idea of progress. One of the aphorisms of my book is evolution is not a line, it's a network. It's not even a tree, it's a network. So in that sense, when I talk about the evolution of media, I talk about intermediality, I talk about analyzing, if you can analyze a single media, but always you have to check what's happening around it, the relationship, especially the relationship with other media. In that sense, concepts, categories like intermediality, coevolution, each one of these has a single chapter in the book. So I think that's the idea I'm defending, I'm proposing. Another idea, or key idea of the book, this is the book I have more references, almost 600 references.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's a pandemic book, I had a lot of time. I think that the theory of media evolution is already there. We have a lot of scholars in the last 50 years, more. Harold Innis, we talk a lot about him today. I think the theory of media evolution is there. People who talk about adaptation, people who talk about discussions about extinction of media, people who talk about coevolution. So what I did in this book is just to try to put together different points. That's the idea of such a number of references, to check who was talking about what and try to connect these points, to propose this approach. It's a conversation. It's just it's a proposal to continue the discussion and to propose a series of analytical categories. This idea of life cycle is very popular, not only in media studies, but to talk about the emergence of media. If we talk about emergent media, we forget about the new media, old media, these horrible concepts, useless concepts. If we talk about emergence as a complexity process. If we talk about adaptation, that's really cool because, let's say, a new media, when it arrives, it has to adapt to the media ecology. But at the same time, the old media, they have to adapt if they want to survive in the media ecology. The concept of extinction is critical because we know that the content of a new media is an old media. So, just to say, the title and subtitle of the books, I think, are very important. Understanding on the evolution of media is Darwin, but not the linear, basic interpretation of Darwin by social sciences 150 years ago. No, It's Darwin plus complexity. And the subtitle is Understanding Media Change. That's McLuhan.
Absolutely. And well, I like the idea about the necessity to overcome the paradigm of linearity and adopt a more holistic, comprehensive, and networked approach, right, to the idea of evolution of media. And I totally agree that even the idea of life cycle is usually intended as something linear, right? So instead, in conceiving a life cycle as an always changing, unpredictable path, I think gives a more special twist, right, to the research.
When you put different life cycles, new media are emerging, old media are trying to survive. So that's the complexity. You have a network.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of technologies and media that can have an impact on our daily life, I wanted to make a nice-breaking question for our panelists, Siobhan and Mon. I was curious, is there a technology or a medium that significantly played a role in your day-to-day life, and what are the implications that this technology have for the ideas presented in the book? I know you got the book already, so you have a sense of Carlos' approach. So you have to, I'll start with Siobhan. If you have to pick a technology that really played a role in your life, how can you think of this technology in light of Carlos' reflections on the evolution of media?
Mm-hmm. Well, keeping an answer short, I will actually just narrow it down to ChatGPT and say generative AI, and at a very broad scale, I think the implications of what's possible, the kind of longitudinal and short-term impacts are really volatile and need extensive examination. And I'm seeing it, and I'll just narrow it down in my own experiments and also some of the material that's coming to me. The collapse or blurring between truth and fiction, or truth and concoction, is quite alarming. It would be helpful if ChatGPT actually had a header which said, does it matter if the answer is true? If yes, do you have the expertise to actually assess the results? If not, green light, go. And I'm thinking about this because actually I think we're getting so many readings on how this is going to impact different industry sectors. So as a technology, which is a chatbot running on highly sophisticated and increasingly complex AI, where we can't see the operations of the neural nets, of the deep learning, I think of actually, the name of the person will come back to me. If we cannot understand the documentation, we should not deploy it. And I think that question of how the output is being generated and what is actually feeding it, what is the basis for it, and the blurring of truth and fiction is just at magnitude and scale, we can't even foresee the implications of that. We're getting many indicators. So I'll stop there.
All right, no, thank you. The evolution or revolution. So maybe later we will talk more about the difference between revolution and evolution in the media. But such a ChatGPT or AI, generative AI revolution somehow took the world by storm. And so it's now the moment to really critically understand the potential implications. So thank you for raising this up. And Mon, what's your technology that played a role in your life, and how you can assess this technology in light of the media evolution perspective?
Okay. Cloud of options here, complexity attacking me now. Mm-hmm. I'd say, and because I'm here of my country, one of the technologies you realize that actually becomes vital is Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi has this particular feature that is material, is physical, is infrastructure that needs to be out there. but also has particular features of access possibilities or impossibilities. Wi-Fi has this very open or very clear condition, which is either you have access because you have the password or you don't, and that kind of system of granting access, not granting it, enabling, not enabling, raises the whole discussion about what lies behind it, which is the internet, everything that hangs from it, everything we depend on. And you start realizing how much you depend on it the minute you miss it, the minute you start finding the holes, or finding yourself like jumping from one Wi-Fi to the next, trying to keep connection to a world you knew before you were this dramatically disconnected. But there's more also. There's the issue of the need of Wi-Fi that you don't realize that you need as much when you are off your country. You realize more when you're off your country, because it's not a place where you have your data from your phone that basically switches from access to non-access, Wi-Fi to non-Wi-Fi, and it makes it seamless. And what I think is interesting here too is that how this data is so nationally border-oriented, border artificially built, and imposed on us by some administrative and political regime that we pretend to be jumping through globalization principles and through principles of an internet that's for everyone, everywhere, all the time. And I think that this is my way of getting an answer to this.
All right, thank you. And I'll be back to the idea of revolution, evolution, because ChatGPT seemed like a revolution. So suddenly it seems that we were not prepared to such a quick revolution brought up by generative AI, a mainstream generative AI, so largely available. So that's why, again, in the perspective of your book, Carlos, again, where the media evolution is intended as a process of emergence, competition, dominance, hybridization, and so on. Again, this kind of evolutionary perspective seems to contrast with the idea of a sudden revolution, right, that happens so quickly. So can we consider certain moments of drastic change and as a revolutions within the media, broader media process of evolution? Are there some revolutions, or should we understand all changes in the media landscape as part of an ongoing evolutionary process? So how do we cope with the revolution, in this case brought to by ChatGPT?
Yeah, in the book I do not talk a lot about revolutions, but obviously evolution is not flat. We have moments of acceleration, emergence of a lot of new media in a few years. I think in the last 30 years, in the last 10,000 days, we have an acceleration after the creation. The web is a meta-medium. It's a media that created other media. YouTube was born in the web, and Facebook, and so on, the Wikipedia. In the last 30 years, we have an acceleration, emergence of a lot of new media. And if you compare this situation, the most similar situation before that was at the last part of 19th century. We have in 50 years the arrival of the emergence of photography, the telegraph a little bit before, we had the phonograph, we had the cinema, the comics. So between, I would say, 1860, 70, and 1895, the cinema, we have in 30 years, more or less, we have an explosion of new media. So in that case, I talk about punctuated equilibrium events, right? The burst of new media, and sometimes of new contents. In the last 30 years, we have a burst, an explosion, emergence, a punctuated equilibrium, a concept from paleontology, biology, an explosion of new media. For example, in the early 90s, middle 90s, with the explosion of new web pages. It was a phenomenal, incredible acceleration of creation of new web pages. Google found the solution for indexing all these new pages. No human group could do that before that. After that, we have obviously a burst, an explosion of mobile applications. And now I think we are in front of an explosion of artificial intelligences. I think we should use the plural for that. In 3 months, 4 months, we do not talk about 30 years, we are talking about 6 months. And I think we are in front of a typical explosion, burst, punctuated equilibrium in this case of artificial intelligence applications. Bob Logan from the University of Toronto, he applied this idea of punctuated equilibrium to other moments of the evolution of Homo sapiens. And I think that in that sense it's a useful concept that comes from biology to define these moments of high variation in the natural evolution. We also have huge extinctions sometimes.
Yep. I was thinking, thank you, Carlos, for pointing this out. I was thinking about the extinction. So we talk about a sudden revolution. Let's pass me the term. I know you don't like the term speeches, media speeches. Well, let's use it for now. So let's say there are some media speeches, let's say, at risk, so endangered media speeches. So if we follow the evolutionary biology analogy, right, a great deal of effort is focused on preserving the biodiversity, preventing species extinction, right? So, and again, what criteria should we adopt to identify those forms of media that are, again, at stake? How we can identify the media speeches that need to be preserved and held from the extinction. So,
yeah, as I said before, it's very difficult to say this media is completely extinct. 15 years ago, this conversation, we could say, oh, the vinyl LP, the record, has completely disappeared. And that's a new concept, re-emergence, included in the book also. So, and Marshall McLuhan said, no, the content of a media is another media. We can say the content of a new media is an old media. Yes, the content of the SMS messages is the telegraphic language from the 19th century. The telegraph, we can say it has disappeared. The telegram, we don't send telegrams anymore. But there's one part of that media is in the new media or the emergent media in the 90s in the SMS, for example. We still use some kind of telegraphic language. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this media has completely extinct. No? It doesn't exist anymore. If we want to play with the biological metaphor, we can say that a piece of DNA from the telegraph is alive inside the new species, media species. Like in biological environments, obviously, we have the DNA of dinosaurs in the birds today. So, in that sense, the concept of extinction is critical. It's critical in that sense because it's difficult to say, oh, this is completely disappeared. And what can we do? I don't know if we can, because that's a great question, because should we preserve the old media? Now all media are in the museums. It's like a zoo. We put the animals there. But I think, should we create, how can we organize this? And in that sense, I think that media ecology, but also media archaeology has worked a lot with that. You know, media archaeology and media ecology, they have this artistic area, and they want to play with the old media. And from that perspective, it's very interesting what media archaeologists they do, because sometimes they reconstruct old media or they mix an old media with digital technologies. So I don't know if we have to preserve all the media, but maybe I think it's useful to keep that working in some case. I don't know, to go beyond the idea of museum, beyond exposition. We have beautiful museums, I don't know, in Torino, in Italy, the Museum of Cinema. Yes. But you see these devices, but why not making the people interact with these devices? because knowing the past is good for designing the future. If the content of a new media is an old media, means that if you want to create a new media, it's useful to have a good background about how the old media used to work.
I'll take you, Carlos. I wanted to keep building with our panelists and guests. Siobhan, I mentioned already the Kensington Market, the Hidden Stories project on augmented reality, a new media species that essentially popped up a few decades ago. So could you reflect on the book's discussion of media emergence and adaptation in the context of augmented reality technologies? Again, so there is an emergence for sure, emergent media, and how the augmented reality is adapting to the media overall context. So how do you assess augmented reality in the context of media evolution?
Yeah, I think the moment that we were designing and making it, augmented reality was more limited in terms of access on mobiles. It was very costly to create. And asking people to walk around. This is a sort of a project for mobile where you'd walk through Kensington Market and basically sort of scanning using particular interface that the developers had designed. You would get an overlay on a building of content, archival materials related to that site, people who had worked there. So as a particular project designed in 2017, it looked back to a series of projects, in particular, like an absolute a sort of foundational referent was a 2003 Toronto launch project, which was Murmur, which was an oral sort of storytelling, oral history project where you would dial into a cell phone number and then hear a story connected to the address when you saw the little sort of ear marker that told you there was a story in this location. And that was launched by James Roussel, Sean McAuliffe, and Gabe Sawney. There were also really, really sort of gorgeous projects that were sort of emerging. There was one in London, sort of a London history project, which again was augmented reality. So you could, you know, sort of be in a particular location in London, use the app, and then you would get an overlay again of an archival photograph. So it was kind of, often these projects were working with either known historical narratives. Ours was working with uncovering stories and histories of places by looking at what archival traces we could find around the buildings. Now I want to kind of switch talking about it because part of that process of like working with a new technology and an adaptation of archival material into this new form also involved asking people to walk around looking at their mobiles on the streets, which is really risky and dangerous, and you really shouldn't be doing this in busy places. So we looked to the most ironclad terms of service on the planet in 2017, which was Niantic's Pokemon Go. Because Pokemon Go asked people to walk around in public spaces searching for Pokestops and Pokemon. And it was like, okay, this has been vetted by so many global teams of lawyers. I think we're safe to follow this particular set of terms of service. And underlying that, I also want to then speak to like something I think which is sort of a yes and dimension to the thinking that you're bringing, Carlos, in terms of the complexity of the evolution and then the ecology is actually the underlying drivers that I think of in terms of basically the kind of ad-driven, data-driven economic global system that we're in. So something like Pokemon Go, which is incredibly profitable, has to have a terms of service at scale and is also tracking data. We weren't doing that. We were creating something which was a very small scale, bespoke. We're going to, you know, in effect, kind of create this encounter with content, which is very contained and constrained. So as part of, I think, a kind of, you know, that current window of adaptation, emergence, and new media forms, it was piggybacking on already existing models. And it went nowhere near as deep at scale into what other, you know, sort of massive global global corporate entities we're building in this space. And I think that underlying environment of the ad tech and the sort of data tracking is something which underlies as a driver. If a new media, a new technology is profit driven, you have to factor that in. I'll just pause
fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Siobhan. And Mon, I have a question for you. So, considering your research on media governance, so how do you perceive the book's theoretical framework informing our understanding of governance and governance mechanisms within this evolving media ecology? So how does this evolutionary framework account for power dynamics and the democratic debates taking place within these spaces?
Well, I have the privilege to having read the book. So thank you, Carlos, thank you, publisher, thank you, Paolo, for having me here and letting me answer this, because it has been very inspiring. The chance of getting these not new sort of conglomerate of concepts together under the same gaze or the same line of pages, because the reading, yes, is linear, not even actually, because the middle block of the book is a form of a dictionary that goes from concept to concept with examples. Sorry, it's a very, very well articulated book. And one of the things that it has done to me is has immediately double clicked on things that I had in mind, that you carry with you, that you think of. And over the last few years, I've been looking into the concept of public sphere, because the concept of public sphere, as much as it sounds like a old concept, actually it was used in 100 years ago by people like Hannah Arendt, and then appropriated, not sure in the best of the terms, by Jürgen Habermas, which is the one we tend to recognize as. That concept has survived this time because it does something many concepts have not done, which is combine the notion of community and population, the notion of regulation as a self-regulated community that have the conditions for the public debate and to set up their own common rules, and the media as the environment within which this discussion is possible and the conditions of possibility for that public discussion. So bringing these three things together makes it a very relevant, explanatory, useful concept. And when you look at it against the background of the understanding of the media that comes through a complex ecosystem and a complex evolution, and that they both happen together, it's a lot more interesting to look at the notion of public sphere as of today. It stops becoming something that you read in the newspapers and it's only for serious people. You can put the theater in the pool and in the cocktail and discuss what role does theater, or what role do telenovelas, or what role did the platforms play in the building of those conditions of possibility for the public debate. And this is something that most of the understandings of the media and the communications before didn't allow you to do. They didn't allow you to think about it as in the complexity that this book enables. So I really look forward to just driving this further and say, okay, what's the next discussion about public sphere? We need to incorporate all of that and think again. And think again, not as something that's linear, flat, and homogeneous, and that distinguishes, okay, only the serious debates happen here. The non-serious debates are not allowed. No way. You really need to bring the complexity on board. And I think that's something new. And by that I mean that the book also allows you to think further, not on that concept, which is something I've been working on, but other areas of investigation that basically challenge the notion of media from the core.
Right. However, speaking of the public sphere, there is an issue. Well, in contrast to the idea of public sphere, what's the role of the private sector in the very emergence of media. So let's think about the emergence of media in the past few decades. So they played an important role, corporate entities, private sector, technological innovators that actually played the role, the innovation itself, right? It's a kind of emerging form, right? To shake and move and change things as an agent of change. The private sector, the media conglomerates, essentially they shape a role. They shape the media evolution. So I'd like to take this question to all of them, so all of you. So maybe starting with Carlos and then Siobhan and then Mona. So again, what's the role of the private sector in this evolutionary process of media change? So your take.
At the end of the book, there's a short reflection about what are the forces behind media change. That's another book for the future. Maybe I will not be the author because the invitation is to open the game.
Look forward to
the
it.
next pandemics, maybe. And obviously, technological innovation is a force, is an energy pushing media evolution. For example, the emergence of talkies, the movies with the sound in the 30s, or digital technologies and so on. Now artificial intelligence. And obviously, the interactions between humans and media is a force of media change. We know that there's a big difference between what the creators of media, designers, what they think, what they produce, and how we use that. This is basic semiotics of interpretation applied to technology and media. So these frictions between the different levels is also a force also of change. So the relationship, the competition between media is also another vector that moves. But regarding technologies, yes, obviously innovation is important. And also the combination of actors. I think most of the chapters include a case study. One of the case studies in the chapter of emergence is the emergence of the web. So we have a linear storytelling about the origin of the web. We have Vannevar Bush, Ted Nelson, Tim Berners-Lee, the web. We have good storytelling, for example, Manuel Castells' description. There's a good paragraph where he includes about 25 names of people who participated in the creation of the web, all men, no women. It's like the conquest of space in the 60s, there were no women. Now we discover after half a century that there were Afro-American women also working there, but they were completely cancelled. It seems that happened the same in the web. So that's to add complexity. But we have, in this official storytelling, we have identified different actors by saying that there are more actors that we need to recover, to identify in the interaction that made possible the web. Even experiences before the web. In Chile, for example, in the early 70s, before the Pinochet with Salvador Allende government, they created some kind of proto-internet for the government. Now there's a book about that. The Minitel system in France is well known. Do you know that Tim Berners-Lee, he has created another software before the web, a software called Enquire, a hypertextual software? We know practically nothing about that. So there are many, we have to fill in the blanks, but also these actors that sometimes they're marginal in the storytelling that we have right now.
Right. So let's move on, Siobhan. So again, does the private sector lead or play a role in the evolution?
I will keep a really brief answer because there's a lot to say, and I entirely agree with you, Carlos. And I would just sort of expand from that and say that the private sector as a driver of innovation has, in the context of sort of technology in the computational fields and digital media, has largely done this completely unregulated. And I think that is absolutely a critical factor in terms of the kinds of sort of global challenges that we're seeing with new technologies, whether that's sort of the continuation of bias and discrimination in algorithmic systems, data processing, HR applications, or what we're looking at in the context of, sort of basically releasing new technologies into the world, in the wild, to have people test them. In the context of the GDPR, you would have to do a privacy assessment, privacy impact assessment. And the fact that we are in this environment where technologies are being released without any due diligence as to what the impact will be, I think is actually egregious, but at least we are now having this conversation, and there is legislation that is coming in substantially, sort of in the US right now in different ways, and the GDPR exists in Europe. And I believe that tomorrow is the 5-year anniversary of the GDPR, in fact. So we are at least in a different moment, and I sincerely hope to see industry being regulated, because innovation should not be the only driver. Values-based innovation should actually be a guiding core principle.
Right.
We should say that technology and media evolve faster than protocols and regulations.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Definitely.
We
Different
have
pace.
cases of that before. For example, in the early 20th century, there was no copyright law, so everyone, the first movies, they were reproducing different theater works and books or whatever. And after maybe 20 years, they have to regulate that. But I think this is not new. The technology is running faster than, imagine Europe. You have, if you go to create a protocol in Europe, you have 25, 26 countries, I don't know, maybe 24 maybe. And so it's very slow if you compare with the acceleration of the emergence of new things.
A trending topic,
Yeah.
the balance between regulation and innovation. Your quick take, and then
I'll
we
be
open up
quick.
the floor.
I'll be quick
to the
because it's just kind
questions.
of burning my answer kind of here.
Sure.
Yes, because we've seen in the last 3 years women jumping ship from the big corporations, shouting in favor of ethical requirements, ethical needs about how to regulate AI, how to regulate platforms, how to deal with all that kind of process that happens in the backstage of the big corporations that deal with that supposed to be innovation. And it has taken 1 month to jump ship and shout fire to tell us how bad AI will be. And this man has shouted that we need to do things now, but it's already late, and has taken this approach that's a lot more coward than the approach taken by these women who immediately asked for the regulation. This man instead has just said, oh, we need to innovate further from the corporative perspective. I think this shows lines and trends and ways of approaching this whole situation. We need to, again, aligned with the previous examples, just to drop the case.
All right, thank you. And conscious of time, I think, it's time to open up the floor to questions and comments. I see the gentleman already, and I guess there is a question from our online, let's take the questions first from our online streaming, and then we get to our in-person audience. So Noah, thank you, Noah, for your question. What do you believe are the limitations of media evolution as a theory? What phenomena do you think it might not be best suited for? I'll let Carlos take this one.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
Media evolution is right now a proto-theory.
Proto-theory.
It's an emerging conversation about putting together different experiences, concepts, categories. So we have to test that. That's the confrontation between theoretical models and reality. That's the way of doing science. So this is a very, obviously we cannot automatically apply the evolutionary biological models to media and technology. We know that. So I think we have to test that. The idea of this book is also starting this conversation and proposing a series of categories that should be tested. And
Absolutely.
in that moment, we will see the limitations of this theory, this approach, and the limitation of the metaphor, because we know that when a new discipline emerges, metaphors are very important. Media ecology, media evolution, and the spiral of silence, and so on. We have a lot of metaphors in communication theories. So in the beginning, the metaphor is useful because you say, why not? We can think about adaptation. What about extinction? The evolution, the metaphor never comes alone. When you say, I'm going to apply this metaphor, you have a complete dictionary, a semantic galaxy of concepts that you can start testing. So we are in this moment. I think not all the concepts coming from evolutionary, biological, natural theories will be useful here. We have to test that. The idea of media as a species, I wrote that in the book 2 times, and always saying that this is not, it's just a very, very metaphorical use. I don't believe that. But sometimes it's useful for the explanation. But I think we have to test that. That's the challenge. Absolutely. To apply this concept theory.
And also, while reading the book, I felt a sense of consistency in the overall exploration of the metaphor of the evolutionary biology metaphor applied to media. I think consistency is a key, right? That at least makes thing clear from a broader, perspective.
In that sense, it's not a McLuhanian book, in the sense that it's very, I try to simplify the complexity of this. It's very Cartesian, if you want, very linear. It's not a manual, but I think it's not so hard for undergraduate students, for example, to read the book. No? In that sense, I wrote it in English. English is my second or third language, I don't know, because other texts I have written originally in Spanish, when I translate them into English are more complex, because I have more vocabulary, for example, in Spanish. But I wrote it in English, thinking in this, in simplifying, not very long sentences. It's not for dummies, I don't say that, but...
No, but again, so I think consistency is the key. So just to give an example of the book chapters, media life cycle, emergence, dominance, adaptation, survival, extinction, niches, intermediality, and co-evolution, right, as a way to explain, again, the final book chapter is a co-evolution. So I think there's a great consistency in the book, just to address the question from our friend online. And there is a question here, so I think, all right, many questions. They need a microphone, so please, the gentleman was the first, so please speak with a microphone. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Not having read the book, this question may prove not necessarily on point. We are in Canada, so I'm going back to Harold Innis and Northrop Frye, The Bias of Communication, and Northrop Frye posing the question, where is here, from a very intriguing book with a very intriguing title, Bush Garden, when you think of the conceptuality. And so my comment to you is, what is your underlying thesis? What are you hoping to achieve in this book? Or are you just merely using it as an excursus in terms of just conceptualizing your thoughts? Because when I think of media, I think of communication. And communication is not value neutral. Some people may say that communication is atavistic to an individuality, which creates a great deal of issues and problems and can be misconstrued. And I conclude with a writer, Roald Dahl. He said, I do not lie, I merely make the truth more interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Harold Innis is one of the main interlocutors of the book. I dedicate many pages. I think inside the great field of media ecology, there are more dialogues with Harold Innis in the book than, for example, Marcy McLuhan, for example, because obviously I talk about the evolution, history, and the old media. The objective of the book is to propose a set of concepts, categories, to understand the complexity in media, but many ideas can be extended to any technology, let's say. But my idea is that one. To understand complexity is complex. and it's critical, especially if we want to survive in this planet and to understand how media change. And we can open the discussion now. We have also a geology of media. We have people, scholars, thinking in the long-term transformation of media, people thinking about where do the minerals of our media come from and what will happen with this screen or this camera in 10,000 years. So this interest for the time is central right now, and not only in media studies. So I want to propose this dictionary of set of categories with this objective, to start thinking in these new terms, let's say.
All right. Thank you. So we have a gentleman on the first row here, so you can pass the microphone, and I see many actually. All right.
Carlos,
Conscious of time,
Sure.
please make it brief.
Yeah, quickly, Carlos, question to you and to all the panelists. If we agree with McLuhan that media are extensions of our mental or physical faculties, so obviously media are getting better and better in that. They extend us better and better, and finally we are kind of get immersed into the environment better and better. In your opinion, what will be the final medium, the ultimate medium? What will be in the omega point, to use the Desjardins term, of media evolution?
One of the things I repeat many times in the book, and I included different authors that say this, it's impossible to predict the future of a complex system. It's impossible. So, in this sense, the final media, we don't know. We don't know that. You can imagine all the predictions that have been made in the last 200 years about the future of media, the future of education. It's funny to read that. So, right now it's impossible. Maybe we can make some kind of scenario for the next 2 months, but I think that's going. Artificial intelligence, for example, is running too fast. I published an article in February saying maybe in the future artificial intelligence will be included in Photoshop this week.
It's just
I was thinking in maybe 6 months, 1 year. So in this context, to predict which will be the total media, I don't know. It's just, what's useful in media evolution and to understand the past transformation of the media ecosystem is to take decisions right now. Because now we create new media, new technology, and nobody cares about the fourth law of McLuhan, the reversal, what will happen in the future. We love electric cars. What will happen with the batteries in 100 years? No, we don't care about that.
Do you believe in decisions, so we can make decisions about the media?
We are actors in a complex system. So we can act, yes, but we should understand the whole thing. It's impossible. We're just little points. I think that the COVID is a good example of that. I think the pandemic was an accelerated course of evolutionary theory. Everyone knows about variations and mutations now. And it was an accelerated online free course of complexity theory.
Right. Thank you. There's a question on the back, and likely, I was told we can go a bit beyond the clock, but let's keep it short, and then we can move on. Please.
Yes, Scolari. Based on McLuhan's medium is the message. About 10 years ago, Nicholas Carr wrote a book on what technology is doing to the change of brain, New York Times bestseller. Have you looked at the effect of media on human evolution? Because I've been concerned because I have noticed after 60 years of involvement in IT that the more society becomes computerized, the more it depopulates and below replacement towards extinction. And especially looking at the industrial and manufacturing paradigms of East and West, all the new paradigms of total quality, just in time, Kaizen, Kanban, they do not involve computer technology, and it's ChatGPT. What does it will do to our future?
I talk about that in chapter 10 about coevolution, because I talk about coevolution between humans and media, and I talk about coevolution between media. That's intermediality, a specific case of intermediality. The coevolution of telegraph and the train, the railway in the 19th century. Now the coevolution of cinema, comics, and video games. Think about Avengers and Marvel, multiverse. And in the coevolution between human and media, I read a little bit about two levels. The micro level, coevolution between the single, we, human, and the media, how we change, we co-evolve, we develop new skills with this new media. And the coevolution of the macro-human institutions, and that's very close to the mediatization theories, how the media influence, model the other institutions. That's mediatization theory.
Right. We turn for a last question, and then I'll get back to our panelists for a final question. So, please.
Fascinating conversation. I would like to ask, do we have one media ecosystem on planet Earth or many? And if we do have many, what demarcates their borders? And how can we apply the theoretical lens of media evolution on different contexts? Thank you.
In general, I talk about the media ecosystem, but obviously we can talk about the audiovisual ecosystem, we could talk about the artificial intelligence ecosystem. So it's we should work more that concept, or maybe to find different, I don't know if we need other concepts, but I use it in a very flexible way. I talk about the media ecosystem in general, but sometimes in the book also, when I think in beyond the media, I talk about the socio-technological network. It's more Bruno Latour, something bigger.
Right. Wonderful. So a final question for our panelists, starting with Mon, and then Siobhan, and then Carlos, is the same question. Given the evolutionary lens used in this book to analyze the media progress, what are some aspects or trends we should be more concerned about? Or, well, on the flip side, what developments or possibilities make you most hopeful for the future of our media ecosystem? So you can choose either one of the two or both. So Mon, you go first. Reasons for concerns or hope or both?
Reasons for hope. Let me start there. There are many because we can do fabulous things because we have the technologies to do them. We can actually do. We have the skills or the technologies or in a general way or in a shared across way. We have the skills to do fabulous things and to do amazing things in and against or in relation to this planet that we're killing. We can do that. We have the capacity, the possibility, and the resources to do it. The scary bit is exactly that same one, but that they are not equally distributed. They're not providing or sharing those capacities in an adequate way, and we need to intervene for that to happen. So in terms of media ecosystem, in terms of technologies and possibilities, they are all there. We need to be serious and intervene once and for all into ensuring that this doesn't lie or doesn't hide behind some curtain that will basically kill us all at the end. So we need to be serious about it at once and make decisions. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Siobhan, same for you. Hopes and concerns, hopes and concerns for media evolution.
I would say it's actually a bit of a continuation and an expansion on exactly what you're mapping out, and I'll just sort of ground it with a bit of specificity. I think some of the, sort of the new technologies that are assisting communication with individuals who are in either vegetative states in terms of being able to communicate, I should use a different term than that, but who are unable to communicate. So in effect, technologies that can sort of read brainwaves and communicate sort of directly hardware, software, wetware. are extraordinary. That same technology, if it was utilized in a commercial context, so that in effect you have that kind of immediacy of communication between brain, thought, and the web, the internet, sort of computational systems. If it was commercialized so that we were just getting ads, we would have the death of the species very quickly. And there's I would just do a shout out to one of the best novels that was published in 2002, pre-Facebook, pre-social media, which is M.T. Anderson's Feed, which predicts accurately exactly where we are, except for one thing. And he wrote it in 2002, and it is eerie in terms of what happens when computing is internalized and exactly the logics when it's based on a for-profit model.
Wonderful. And Carlos, for you again, for an organic media evolution.
I'm thinking in two concepts. One is emergence. As I said before, in 10,000 days, we have this huge acceleration of new media. And if you think in the past, the papyrus, the scroll, lasts for 3,000 years. And now in 10,000 days, we have seen a huge explosion of new things. And to give a sense to that, to understand that, is a challenge. And the other question is coevolution. And I think the new thing right now is artificial intelligence. And I'm very curious about our coevolution with this new actor. Because the artificial intelligence, as any other media, will change as our way of thinking, perceiving the world, our conception maybe of time and space. Think that artificial intelligence is running too fast for us. One of the fears of artificial intelligence that one day this machine are so fast that may decide to destroy us and we don't realize about that. That is the Terminator, Skynet hypothesis. But they're running very fast. And Fernández Mayo, a Spanish writer and philosopher, he talks about the algorithmic time. It's running too fast. That's very interesting because we have the human time, days, months, years, centuries, and now we have we have an expansion of our perception of time. We have the long time, the Anthropocene, the fossil time, and the future time, and we have this algorithmic time that is like beyond our perception, and we have to learn how to deal with these two different times.
That's a wonderful wrap-up. And so I wanted to thank you all in person, online, for following. Thank you our speakers, Rodriguez Amat, Siobhan O'Flynn, and Carlos Scolari. Thank you Massey College for hosting another wonderful and meaningful dialogue on the future of our society and media. And so again, thank you. And read the book.
We don't have the book here. It will be next month. I think the online version is already, it has been published by Routledge.
The publisher's Routledge. All right.
Yes.
And so, thank you again. Thank you for your participation.